and welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend, Lino. And everyone, it is a crazy time in the NBA right now. We are coming up on the trade deadline. We thought this episode we would spend it talking about what may or may not happen with a Jimmy Butler trade, a De'Aaron Fox trade. And then all of a sudden, as we're recording this, Sunday, February 2nd, late last night, Luka Doncic is traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. You'll have to forgive us. We know it's a Heat podcast. We'll definitely put a Heat spin on it, but this is too big of news to talk about. It might be the most shocking trade in NBA history. Lino, I abandoned you. I fell asleep early when you got these notifications late last night. What was going through your head?
The first thing that went through my head is that I don't think there'll ever be a stage in our life where we'll be able to do an emergency podcast a la Bill Simmons, because you go to bed at like 10:30 p.m.
Correct.
So I realize that's just not something that's ever going to be fundamental to our podcasting careers. But yeah, last night was a truly bizarre experience. I'll remember exactly where I was when Luka Doncic got traded to the LA Lakers. It was truly unbelievable. Like, unbelievable is the one word you can say about it. You get that tweet on your phone, you see that text message from your friend. It says Luka Doncic just got traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis and Max Christie. And you think, man, someone's been hacked. Something's not right. To have a trade of this level, have the first reaction be no one believes it's real, is probably an indictment of the trade for somebody. So
Absolutely.
we'll get into this somebody pretty soon, but overall, just absolutely shocking. The second thing I did was I realized a lot of my friends are either asleep or not online anymore. And so I felt like Paul Revere running around the internet or running around through my phone, just telling people, Luka got traded, wake up, and just trying to find someone to talk to about this. So it was a long night of listening to other emergency podcasts, reading a bunch of stuff about what the heck is going on. I watched ESPN for the first time. It's like I turned on ESPN just to see like what they're talking about. They got Stephen A. Smith on the phone, just like wherever he is in the country right now. They had Kendrick Perkins looking exhausted. He did not look like he wanted to be up reporting on this story. He looked like he was in bad shape. So it was just an insane evening. But, I know you got a nice 9-10 hours of sleep. Woke up first thing in the morning, looked at your phone and saw 16 text messages from me, 30 text messages from the Discord chat. How was your reaction this morning? And, what are you thinking?
So a little peek behind the curtain, and some people will hear this and be saddened by the state of my life. But when I go to sleep, right now at least, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb, and I have my settings to where Twitter notifications still come through. So my thinking is if the Jimmy trade happens, I'll hear it, I'll wake up, and I'll know what happens. Apparently that's not the case because I got so many Twitter notifications and did not wake up to any of them. I think total I had 80 text messages, 2 missed calls, and then so many Twitter notifications. And it's always funny, like you kind of just you open your phone, you see all the notifications, you're like, okay, something crazy happened. But the first thing you see is always what resonates the most. And the first thing I saw was Mark Stein's tweet that said, Luka Doncic did not request a trade. And I was like, what, how could that be relevant? What could that, why could that possibly matter? And then I start scrolling and I'm like, oh my God, this like, it was unbelievable. So, I mean, this is a Heat podcast. We don't have to get into like the ins and outs of everything. Short version, I do not understand this from Dallas's standpoint. My only guess is either they thought Luka was going to go to the Lakers or demand a trade to the Lakers this summer, or they weren't going to give him the Supermax this summer, and they knew that would anger him enough to where he would leave anyway. And then from the Lakers standpoint, that's tough to trade Anthony Davis. You want a championship with him as your second best player. He's been your best player this year, but is Luka. He's 25. He's a top 3 player, probably at worst. You got to do it and just figure it out later. The Luka LeBron fit is crazy. It's like the James Harden, Chris Paul, Houston era on steroids. It's like two of the best super ball handlers ever with almost no surrounding talent. If I was the Lakers, I would be calling every team in the NBA to see what's the best center I can get for Austin Reeves because he's suddenly super expendable now that you
Hmm.
have like the best ball handler in the league on your team. And yeah, we'll just see how it plays out. The other thing, like going forward, the Lakers now have the main attraction superstar to draw in the other superstars. Previously, if you're, name your superstar, Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, whoever, you're like, I could demand a trade to the Lakers, but like LeBron's getting older, AD's getting older. Now Luka's there. They once again become the premier destination for any free agent. They don't have a ton of assets to like trade for a guy, which you usually have to nowadays. But we didn't think they had a bunch of assets last night, and they got Luka Doncic. So
Yeah.
who knows what'll happen.
It's insane, man. And if you'll entertain me, I know this is a Heat podcast, but I do think there's some value in us diving into this just a little bit more, just for anybody who listens to this as a Heat fan, but doesn't really have another avenue to consume NBA stuff. And mostly because I think this is going to have a lot of trickle down effects on, the Miami Heat over the next few years. But the trade is truly insane from a Lakers perspective. We're looking at the end of an era for the Lakers with LeBron's upcoming retirement. And Anthony Davis was kind of what we imagined was going to be the face of the Lakers for the next at least 5 years, or to whenever he fell off the cliff talent wise. But now they have rebooted the Lakers for the next 10 years. Magically, presumably out of nothing. They've punted, maybe have punted on a season where they're a fifth seed and could have had at least one last playoff run with LeBron that could be serious. But I think many of us probably had our doubts about how far that was going to go. But from the perspective of the Mavs, it truly just makes no sense. You know, sure, you don't want to pay $345 million to a guy that you don't like or that you don't see a future with. How you can't see a future with maybe one of the top three best players in the league, beyond me. But if you are afraid to pay Luka Doncic, $345 million, whether it be due to health, whether it be due to winning attitude, like whatever the Mavs excuses they want to make for that, if you won't pay Luka that, who will you pay that money? Like,
Right.
eventually you're going to have the money and you're going to have to pay it to somebody. And the odds are it's going to be a player that's worse than Luka.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't understand how that happens. Now, this roster is not one to be scoffed at, as the current Mavs roster is still very competitive with Anthony Davis. They're a good team with a lot of good players, and they just got immensely better from a defensive standpoint. And, Anthony Davis is playing pretty well. Like, he's got a history of being injury prone, but he played, I think, 72 games last year. He's played in 42 of the 47 games this year. He's currently injured right now. So it's not super helpful to have that conversation or kind of talk about that. But overall, I feel like the Mavs really overthought this. And the big question that I hear a lot of people talk about is, even if all of this stuff can be acceptable as a premise as to why you wouldn't want to sign Luka, why on earth would you not shop it around? Like,
Yeah.
and that's the question I wanted to ask you. Maybe I don't know how much time you've had to think about this. And before I get into a question about how this affects the Heat, is there a better center you could get right now for Luka Doncic than Anthony Davis?
I mean, I think you could get any center not named Jokic for Luka Doncic. So it just depends. I mean, I think AD, I guess, is the second best center after Jokic. So maybe not. Um, but yeah, to your point, it's so interesting because we'll never know what this market would have been.
Hmm.
This would have been the best player to change teams maybe since Anthony Davis. I mean, in terms of age and everything else factoring in, when
Yeah.
he left New Orleans, it was a similar kind of conversation. Like this is like trading, a future Hall of Famer, a top 75 player in their absolute prime, and the return for that can never really be enough. So to feel like you got a return that at least the general consensus thinks comes up short is devastating as a fan base.
You bring that up and you just remind me, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but that means the Lakers have done this twice
Yes.
where they've stolen a Hall of Fame player from a
Right.
random organization, and I feel like 2 for 2, these teams are going to fail in the
Right.
future, and the
Yeah.
Lakers are going to win
Well,
another championship.
yeah, and this is just what the Lakers do. As a Heat fan, I'm super jealous because we try and do this, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like, if any Lakers fan would have told me last week, I think we're getting Luka, I would have laughed in their face. I would have been like, you know
Mhm.
nothing about the NBA, and they literally just did. So,
Yeah,
but to your point about the dynamics of trading a superstar like this, I do think this will be interesting to see if it starts a trend of
mhm.
these stealth mode trades. And
Yeah,
I think if we're going to tie back to the Heat, what's happened with the Heat and Jimmy Butler could be informative of this
mhm.
because obviously Jimmy's not near the level of player Luka is. Not saying that, but the way Jimmy has been able to tank his trade value to try and manipulate the market to get exactly to where he wants to go to get to Phoenix. I could see Dallas being fearful that Luka could have done that same thing, right? I mean,
absolutely.
and they've seen Anthony Davis do that to get to the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers, the Pelicans still got a great return for AD, overall, several good young players, lots of picks. But the point remains, if Luka had gotten word of this, had had time to think about it, or maybe even in the summer, I mean, it would have been an insane bidding war. But I,
Because all it takes is him saying, "I'm not re-signing with the Lakers," and that whole
right,
trade blows up, and then,
exactly, yeah,
it's a free-for-all.
and then then you get into he's saying I'll only sign with team X or Y, and then that team is like, well, we're not going to give you everything. He's clearly only going here. We might give you two first. We're not giving you five. So maybe that's the argument. Maybe this is the start of this trend. This is the counterpunch to the player empowerment. Demanding trades when you only have a year left on your contract. Maybe you just do it in the dead of night. I think if you told Pat Riley everything that's happened to this point this past summer, he probably would have called Memphis and been like, hey, I'll give you Jimmy Butler right now. All I want is Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and a first. And Memphis would have been like, are you serious? Like, yep, send it in. And it would already be done. Jimmy wouldn't have had the chance to be like, I don't want to play for Memphis. And
Mhm.
so you could see that as kind of like a counter is
Yeah,
what we saw. But again, Dallas didn't even get everything. They didn't even get all the Lakers firsts.
they got one first and Max Christie.
Yeah, they didn't get Reeves. And again, that also probably means another move is coming for the Lakers. I'm assuming they're going to desperately try and get a center now that they can't start Jackson Hayes along with the two best ball handlers in the league. They got to get an actual high caliber center. But
Yeah,
regardless, from a transaction standpoint, it's so interesting. Something like this
mhm.
happened in the dead of night, being completely shocking to NBA executives, not to
Yeah.
fans. Like, obviously, we're shocked, but like, I think Bobby Marks tweeted he's never seen so many executives be shocked by a move.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, this
unbelievable.
completely resets the market too, and we can kind of use this to transition into how this affects the Heat. Like, how can we make this about us?
Right.
One, this completely resets the market as far as value for a player. The best player maybe ever traded in like a trade in the past 10 years, um, just went for a worse player, an older player, um, a rookie that really doesn't have that high of a ceiling. Shout out to Max Christie, or I guess he's not a rookie anymore. He always just looks like a rookie to me.
Yeah, young,
I see
solid
him.
role player.
Yeah, and then one pick. That is a complete reversal of what we just saw with the trade from Brooklyn and the five
Hmm.
picks for McCall Bridges. Like, this is completely flipped where the market stands, and that's going to have a wave of effects and trade conversations for the next week because
Hmm.
people are going to be asking for guys like Jimmy Butler or guys like De'Aaron Fox, and those owners are going to be like, we want 3, 4, 5 picks, and they're going to say, Luka Doncic just got traded for a pick in Anthony Davis. We're
Right.
not giving you 5 picks. There's no
Yeah.
point. Like, if you need to get rid of them, hand them over. But
Yeah.
likely that is a whole thing. The other thing is, from the Heat's perspective, and a lot of people have reported this, that they really value that free agency cap space for the 2026 summer, the 2027 summer, for real high end free agents like Luka Doncic. Um, Now, whether or not he's available was always one of those things where, like, surely he's going to sign a supermax, so he won't be available. Pat Riley, what are you talking about? Now that he's been traded from the Dallas Mavericks, he is no longer eligible for a supermax, and he can sign, I think, like a $45-48 million extension with the Lakers, possibly. But there's no reason he couldn't sign that with someone else and decide he just wants to build up to a supermax through a different team if he doesn't like how, he got to the Lakers, if he doesn't want to be a Laker. I think he likes LA. I think he loves LeBron. I think it's going to be great, but it did make that at least slightly more possible, and really leads to the fact that, sure, on paper, there may not be a free agent that is clearly going to be available for us that summer, but you really never know what's going to happen every summer. You never know
Yeah.
who's really going to be available. You never know who is going to opt out of a contract or really become a free agent. And you need to be flexible for when that time arises. And while maybe those summers in particular won't be very special for us, we just can't be in cap space hell for the rest of perpetuity. Like,
Mhm.
this is something that has made that much more interesting moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. Would you rather be average with flexibility or slightly above average with no flexibility? The
Exactly.
answer is clear because you eventually want to be good and you have
Mhm.
to have flexibility. You have to quit trading away first. You have to just hunker down and wait for the next guy to come available. I agree with you. I think Luka's going to sign whatever extension the Lakers offer because they're going to make him the king of LA. He's not going to have to worry about his diet. He's not going to have to worry about availability. I mean, the Lakers, better than any other franchise, cater to stars. They are going to make him king. LeBron's going to give him the Mufasa, everything the light touches speech, and they're just going to rock and roll. So yes, I think you put it perfectly. Luka leaving Dallas felt like an impossibility 24 hours ago, and he's already on another team. So it does highlight having flexibility at least allows you to be in these conversations potentially. So it is such an insane trade. There's a lot of different angles to talk about it, but as far as the Heat are concerned, I think if you want to put a positive Heat spin on it, if I were the Warriors or the Suns, I would kind of think, okay, Dallas just got probably a little worse. The Lakers, you could argue, short term maybe got a little worse just because the fits on both of those teams are going to take some time. So,
Mhm.
like, could we jump those teams if we acquire Jimmy Butler? Maybe that would be my hope, as those teams feel like, okay, now we have a little more of a chance to work our way up in the standings. But we'll just see. I mean, we're going to talk about the trade deadline in detail later on and kind of get into some predictions about what exactly we think will happen with Jimmy. But it'll be interesting. It's so fun. Everybody's like, oh, what's the first domino that's going to fall? And like, in no way could I have ever considered Luka Doncic was going to be the first domino of the trade deadline. It's just unbelievable in season. So the Towns trade happened technically in the preseason, right?
Mhm.
Since then, the most significant players to be traded in this season are Dennis Schroeder and Dorian Finney-Smith, and that's about it. And we went from that to Luka Doncic.
And
Like,
right before that, PJ Tucker also got traded. By
yes,
the
right.
way.
I mean, it's literally been like salary cap, role player, blah blah blah, and then I mean, in my opinion, the guy with like, I have to think about it, the fourth most trade value in the entire league. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
it's probably like Jokic, Wimby, and then Giannis, Shea, Luca is a conversation. So
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I mean, we
We
could
can get
spend all
for an
day on
hour
it.
and
Do you
keep
have any
going.
other thoughts before we kind of get on to more Heat specific stuff?
No, no, that should do it.
Okay.
Sorry, Jaren, brother, if you're
Yes.
listening, dude. Man.
Sorry to our friend Jaron, huge Mavs fans. Doesn't deserve this. He's stuck with them through losing Porzingis, losing Brunson, and I saw this morning the Dallas Mavericks Instagram account has already lost like 700,000 followers since this trade, and I
It's
I
crazy.
don't blame them one bit. Also, I will say, just like for anyone listening to this, same amic of the Athletic reported the Mavs did approach one other team about swapping stars, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
declined. So if I'm just totally guessing, I would guess that was Milwaukee if they were looking for
Mhm.
like a defensive centerpiece, and that makes sense why Milwaukee would say no to that. But we'll
Yeah.
be interested to see if that comes out. If it comes out that that team was Miami, I can't say what I'll do publicly, but but I'm sure it wasn't. Surely it wasn't. Also, Pat Riley, please step down and let Goran Dragic be our next president of basketball operations
It
for
would,
obvious reasons.
yeah, that would help a few things.
But speaking of an incredible all star player, we have a new all star for the Miami Heat. Tyler Herro, 6'6" shooting guard out of Kentucky, has been selected to be an all star reserve for this year's All-Star game. We talked about it last podcast. It was worrisome. There's stiff competition. Cade made it, Garland made it, Lillard made it, and Tyler was the final reserve. He beat out guys like Trae Young, Tyrese Maxey, Tyrese Halliburton, LaMelo Ball. I mean, it's a big deal for Tyler to accomplish this. The third player ever drafted by the Heat to become an All-Star. If that's pretty crazy when you think about that. It's Dwayne, Bam, Tyler. The 11th player ever to be selected as an All-Star as a member of the Heat. Lino, when this news broke, what did this moment mean to you as a fan? What did it mean as somebody that supported Tyler? What do you think it means for his career? What were your thoughts when all this transpired?
It was just a really emotional moment, just being happy for the guy as a fan, as a follower of Tyler's whole career since he got to the Miami Heat and everything that he's been through as a Heat player. It just means so much, I think, to culminate to this point where he gets recognized for all the work he's put into his game, all the development he's had, and specifically what he's doing for this team this year. Bam will always be known as kind of the foundation of this team, but Tyler is probably the only reason the ship has not completely sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Like, he has done so much for this team. He's carried a very large offensive load, and he's developed a game that really allows him to do so. This is a guy who has survived at least 4 rounds of trade rumors after, being an incredible rookie, having a great season, and then summer after summer we're talking about, should we trade Tyler Herro for this? Should we trade Tyler Herro for that? And I was personally one of those guys who, for better or for worse, just never felt like there was anybody worth trading Tyler for yet, just because it felt like there was something still there and some potential that I felt like he was going to realize eventually. And if we could get it at the right time, it would be very special to pair that with a player like Bam. And, as we got Jimmy Butler, it seemed like the perfect piece next to both of those players, a guy who can be a prolific shooter. And that has been what he's turned into. It's been hard to believe it throughout the season. I see Tyler taking like a 36-foot three, and I'm like, are you really taking that shot? And then it goes in 40% of the time. And I'm like, okay, I'm just now starting to get used to the fact that Tyler can do this and is doing this consistently. And, I know he believes in himself more than anybody. So I'm really glad that, he was able to accomplish this, because I know it means a lot to him. And I think it'll be, really the ultimate silver lining of a tumultuous season for us. But, what was your reaction when you saw Tyler win this accolade? And, how do you feel about, where he's at right now in his career?
It was really important. I think it was really important to the fan base because, like you said, this season has mostly sucked. And for most of the last 2 seasons, really dating back to the summer of the Dame trade that never happened, that was a miserable summer. Then that season, everybody kind of felt like stale, I guess is the right word. It felt like,
Mm-hmm.
should we still be here? Some of us were almost traded. And then it ends with, your franchise player in Jimmy Butler tearing his MCL in the play-in. You're losing 5 to Boston. So that was a rough year. Then this year, obviously all the Jimmy drama. And it was kind of just like, man, years from now, will anything about this season be remembered other than one of the ugliest divorces in NBA history? And
Mm-hmm.
finally, like you said, we do have at least one thing we can cling to, which is with the 13th pick in the NBA draft, the Miami Heat were able to select an all-star. And they also did that with the 14th pick, and bam. And it's credit to Adam Simon, who's done an awesome job scouting, developing, probably the MVP of the front office over the last 5 to 6 years. And it's so cool for Tyler. It's meaningful for him and his career, and it doesn't mean, they shouldn't have traded him for Donovan Mitchell or maybe even Damian Lillard, but it means the Heat saw something in him that almost no one else could. And we're just a few years removed from people saying it's an awful contract. It has negative value. We were trying to offload him to Utah or Brooklyn just to try and get a couple first to send for Dame. And, Portland didn't want Tyler. Now he's an all-star, and it's totally deserved. I think other than Atlanta fans and Charlotte fans, I haven't seen anyone, from a national standpoint be like, I can't believe Herro made it. Everyone I've seen has said it was deserved. Great basketball minds like Nikias Duncan had Trae over Herro, but he wasn't like, oh, this is blasphemous. He credited what a great year Tyler has had. So Totally deserved. I'm so excited as a fan, to see him in the All-Star game with all these other legends, the media to follow him, get to see all the behind the scenes stuff. I think he's going to do the 3-point contest now, which is going to be a ton of fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's a rough year as a Heat fan, but a couple recent wins, a couple guys playing better, and now a new All Star selection for one of the guys you drafted. It's a very nice silver lining to get to focus on with everything else going on. So
Yeah.
super thankful that Tyler has played to that level, and just couldn't be more deserved.
And I really just wanted to also note, and there's no need to like stomp on other guys. I think Trey Young, LaMelo Ball, incredibly talented basketball players. LaMelo is probably the only good player on his team. And so shout out to him, both of those guys. I don't think I'd be mad if either of them were in the All-Star. I'd be disappointed if Tyler hadn't made it because of them. But I know there's a lot of anger regarding those guys not making it from their fan bases. And I get it. Those are your guys. You're going to ride for them. But I was appreciative of the fact that when Tyler really didn't win the fan vote by any capacity, that the coaches were able to recognize, the level of efficiency and positive impact he has on winning basketball compared to, and the level of availability too, which is, a stark contrast to how we understand Tyler Hero from previous seasons.
Mm-hmm.
That the coaches were able to recognize that and award that, because I do think those things matter.
Yep, definitely. Moving on to another person that plays guard for the Miami Heat, Terry Rozier is under federal investigation. Uh, that is an actual thing that's happening. So, if any of you guys remember the whole Jonte Porter controversy from a couple years ago, Jonte Porter was basically providing insider info to gamblers to bet unders on his player prop bets, and then he would take himself out of the game to make sure the under cash, and he's probably going to prison, and a lot of other people are. That's Jonte Porter, to be clear. Apparently, that same group of gamblers, I guess, also bet the under on a Terry Rozier game when he was in Charlotte in 2023. Terry started the game, played the first quarter, left with a foot injury. There are tweets from then of people saying they received inside information that Rozier would be pulled from the game. That doesn't mean it came from Terry. As currently recording, Terry is under no prosecution for wrongdoing. He's just a part of the investigation because all of these people bet on his gambling lines and seem to have some inside info. That could be from a coach, from the training staff. That doesn't mean Rozier was in a Discord saying bet my unders, right? So I know
Yeah.
the Jonte Porter thing was crazy. He's banned for life from the NBA. He's probably going to prison. That all came out at once. The NBA already did an investigation of Terry Rozier back in 23, found no wrongdoing. Now the federal government is doing an investigation, and I doubt they'll find anything much more than that. I don't think there's too much to be concerned for as far as Terry's availability. But Lino, I want you to talk about that a little bit, just your thoughts, but then also kind of want to just talk about on the court how Terry's been playing lately.
Yeah, man. This was a scary situation, no pun intended, because as a person who has probably 99% of the Terry Rozier stock, as a proud owner of Terry Rozier stock,
Buy the dip.
by the dip to the moon, I was, really just kind of sad. I From what we understood about the situation and the fact that he left the game early in a late March game for the Charlotte Hornets due to a foot injury that did seem to be bothering him when you look at the footage. It just seemed like normal end of season stuff. Like, this guy's going to take off, obviously, and probably get shut down for the season, because what are the Charlotte Hornets even playing for at that point? And so, and clearly they were planning on trading him, so him getting like actually injured is something they really wanted to avoid. So it really didn't seem like any wrongdoing was going to be there. I mean, we'll, I guess, find out otherwise, but I think everybody's under the safe assumption that Terry's fine and really didn't have anything to worry about. But this was really bad for the Terry narrative and for the fan base, because they definitely, use this often to, extrapolate on his performance over the past year, which has been tough from a shooting perspective. He's really struggled scoring wise, but this past week has been pretty special from Terry. Nothing otherworldly, but one thing I think you and I have talked about with Terry is that despite not having a great shooting season, the effort we see from this guy and the engagement that we get from him in almost every other aspect of basketball, on and off the court with the team, and like the conversations that he has and the energy he puts out there. He's just an easy guy to root for. And it's honestly, for me, a hard guy to root against. I just really wanted him to figure it out and turn it around, because I knew as soon as the shot started falling, this would be an incredible player to have on the floor at any time. And so these past few games, he's really been able to, really see the ball go into the hoop. And that is starting to build over the past 3 games. And it's been pretty special to watch happen, because I think that as a scorer, I think that he just is really special, when he can really get going and have that microwave effect. And that's been the case over the past few games. But, how did you feel about Terry so far?
Yeah, it like you said, originally it made me very sad because I was like, this dude is already having such a difficult year on the court, and like you were saying, he's clearly trying to impact the team in a positive way as best he can, picking up full court, rebounding. He's trying anything he can do to make an impact. And so to have a federal investigation, all the jokes about like, oh, that's why he's been shooting so bad, all kind of just garbage already being piled on him. It was tough, but it was so cool to see these past 4 games. He's really started to put some stuff together. So over his last 4 games, he's averaging 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, all off the bench, 50% from the field, 40% from three. And he just looks more comfortable. And like we talked about last show, when his shot's falling, he just looks more decisive. He knows where he wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
He also, Eric Reed on the broadcast has been pointing this out. He does miss layups that make you like kind of grit your teeth, but above average right now at the rim for a guard
Mm-hmm.
on layups. And I think shooting the best of his career at the basket right now. I think he's at 60% around the rim. So those are good numbers. Free throw shooting has been excellent. And if he can just consistently put together solid shooting nights, that'll go a long way for this team that needs another ball handler they can rely on. Spo, Bam, several guys have talked about Terry needing to take catch and shoot threes. Even Terry himself, a couple months ago, I think maybe in December, was quoted saying Spo is always on him about you don't need to take the dribble, you don't need to take the step back. Like the flow of this offense, if that ball finds you, you just need to let it fly. And
Yeah.
he's doing that consistently. I think his first 3 makes from three last night were
Mm-hmm.
all catch and shoot. And I think he ended up making 5, and all but one of them were catch and shoot. So it's
Yeah.
really cool to see him try and adapt. And again, that's why I've never totally gotten the hate with Terry, because it's not somebody that's, going against the grain, kind of rebelling against what the team wants him to do. He's clearly trying everything he can do to help this team. And it's cool to see that finally come together a little bit.
Yeah, and that was the most frustrating part about the narrative online about Terry, is that they try to paint this picture of a guy who is like, ball hogging, messing up the flow of the offense, doing all these things. I was like, Terry is not that guy. Like, if you watch the game, like, clearly the team is trying to get him involved. Like, Bam, Tyler, they run this offense. When they want the ball to go to Terry, they want it to go to him. Like, it doesn't just
Mhm.
get stuck in his hands. And they want him to be able to do something, because as we've seen, like when you watch, we'll get it maybe into the games a little deeper. When Terry is on and gets it going, that is very scary for the defense.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can do if Terry, Bam, and Tyler are all threats on the floor, either at the
Mhm.
same time or just in their given minutes. That the San Antonio Spurs defense really seemed discombobulated when they had to account for a guy who
Yeah.
they probably were trying to discount, and let them let Terry try to figure it out. And when
Mhm.
Terry figures it out, you're in a lot of trouble. And so,
Right.
and this is also not, this is like, people treat Terry Rozier the same way they treat Julius Randle, as far as from our fan base and how other fan bases, and maybe how the league and media look at Julius Randle in general as this guy who like ball hogs. And I'm not fully out on Julius Randle in that same way, as far as that, it's worse than Terry, but Terry is not that bad in regards to what he does. And Terry, in credit, gives so much more effort everywhere else on the floor that Julius Randle probably doesn't. And so,
Okay, I'm back. At first, I thought you were saying they're both that way, and I was like, no, I
no, no,
think
no, no, no,
Randall is
no,
kind of
no.
a ball hog.
Julius Randle is a ball hog. Like, I'm not completely out on him as a player, but he is like, what the way they treat Terry is as if he's playing like Julius Randle, and that's just not the case. He's picking up
Right.
full court on defense. He's
Yeah.
chasing down boards, and people. it frustrates me so much because people treat Terry's effort as if it's a bad thing. They're like, he's stealing rebounds from Bam Adebayo. It's like, what do
Yeah,
you mean he's stealing rebounds? It's the point
yeah.
is to crash the boards and get rebounds and push the floor. Like, he's just a high effort guy, and I'll never be mad at a high effort guy. The same way I'm not mad at Jaime Jaquez Jr. for maybe not having the best season so far, because he's still out there really trying and trying to figure out
Mhm.
ways to have a positive impact on the floor. So I'm glad he's starting to figure it out. I hope he can sustain this and improve this, because it would mean a lot for our team moving forward.
Definitely. Yeah. And we'll get a little more into the specific games, but he's definitely been having a strong impact lately, and it's much needed, obviously, without Jimmy Butler being around to create shots for others. The next bit of news is just a quick update. As Heat fans, our GOAT, our Lord and Savior, Dwayne Wade, is always going to be precious in our hearts. And there was some news about Dwayne this week. He revealed on his podcast that in 2023, he had to have a mass removed from his kidney or one of his kidneys, and it did end up being cancerous. So that was a very scary thing he had to go through. I think he lost about 60% of one of his kidneys. But again, this was in 2023. He's in great health now, but we had to talk about it just because that's our guy. That's our goat. That's our hero. So glad Dwayne is doing well. Wish him nothing but the best. And that's another person that I wish would sell his stake in the Utah Jazz and come to the Miami front office. Not saying he wouldn't have done that if he would have had the chance. I think that was mostly on the Heat. But regardless, love Dwayne. Glad he's doing well. And he's just the best. I hope he is involved with the Heat more and more in the future.
Oh yeah.
All right, Lino. So before we start getting into the X's and O's, the on the court stuff, we do have to talk about one more off the court thing. This is our final episode before the trade deadline. We might do an emergency show if Jimmy gets traded before then, but assuming it doesn't happen or happens right at the deadline, this will be our last show before the trade deadline. So I want us to make our official predictions. There has been so many rumors. You know, the Luka and Fox thing have barely been in the news a week. Jimmy has been in the news for 2 months. He's been the biggest story in the NBA. What is going to happen at the February 6th deadline? Where is Jimmy going to go? What's the return going to be? If you had to guess, if you have to put it on record, what happens?
Jimmy Butler gets traded to the Dallas Mavericks for Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell. That's the trade. Maybe there's some picks exchange there. I think Dallas decides that they really do want to be a much better defensive team. And so they go get a guy like Jimmy, they go get a guy like AD, and they just figure it out from there. And they seem to have maybe one of the worst front offices ever. So maybe they let us get away with something like that. Beyond that, I really think that he's going to end up on the Warriors. I think we end up with Andrew Wiggins, some draft compensation, and some, salary filler. But overall, I think Jimmy Butler's going to end up on the Warriors. If I had to think about the craziest thing, I just feel like the Mavericks aren't done trading pieces yet. And so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I don't see him being on the Suns. It just does not feel like possible by any capacity right now. But if you had to make one prediction that you feel like is going to happen, where would you be putting Jimmy Butler in 6 days?
I think I agree with you. I think the Warriors is still most likely. If I had to actually bet money on it, I would
Mm-hmm.
I would put my money on the Warriors for a couple reasons. Like you stated, I don't think anybody has wanted Beal through this whole process, and I don't think that has changed. And that is crazy because that's not even factoring in that he has a no trade clause. So they haven't even found a team that wants him. Even if they do, they then have to find a team he'll waive the no trade clause for. So that just seems like a non-starter. Obviously, stuff changes quickly in the NBA, but my guess right now is Phoenix just can't happen for that reason. So to me, that leaves the Warriors, the Bucks, and the Grizzlies. I think the Bucks hold off. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're willing to give enough incentives to Miami to take on the Middleton and Portis contracts, and maybe even the Connaughton contract if that were to happen. I think Memphis is gonna listen to Jimmy's agent that he doesn't want to be there and not pursue him. And so I think it comes down to the Warriors. I if I had to guess, I think they do finally decide to make a move. It just feels like one of those there's too much smoke for there not to be a fire kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I would say he gets traded. I think I said this a couple of shows ago, but I only have it at like 55%. Like, I think there's a real chance he's on the team past the deadline, which is a nightmare, to be clear.
It's become such a much worse situation than I originally thought it would be if he stayed.
Yeah, it would be awful. But the thing is, like Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald reported, there's only one deal offered right now for Jimmy, and it's Beal and picks from Phoenix. And that's just not going to happen. So, I mean, we're 4 days from the deadline, and there's not an offer on the table Miami even has as a fallback offer. So, to me, that's super concerning. Also, the fact that there's so many apron teams involved, it's going to have to be 4 or 5 teams. This isn't something that I think can come together overnight like the Luka Doncic trade did. So, it's concerning for sure. And, this is a front office that prides itself, especially Pat Riley, in ruling with an iron fist. I don't think they're going to take a bad deal just to get rid of Jimmy. Like, and as a fan, I appreciate it. Like, if I got the notification they just took Beal, I would be disappointed, because then
That would be.
your salary cap is basically held hostage for 2.5 seasons, and you also have to deal with a no trade clause, as we're seeing, which is a nightmare for Phoenix. Other than Beal, I would pretty much be okay with anything.
Mhm.
Wiggins would be awesome. I could talk myself into Middleton, and then he's only got a year and a half left. Even Randall, he's an expiring. I don't think he'd really fit, but you could let him walk in the summer or sign and trade, get something.
Yeah,
So I'm not asking for much. I'm just not
take
Beal
anything.
and Jimmy off the team. And again, to be clear, I know there's so much negativity about Jimmy. I feel like it's now unanimously negative towards Jimmy. You've seen Kevin Garnett, a bunch of former players talk really badly about Jimmy. Rachel Nichols came out and said people in the Heat locker room really upset with Jimmy. I do think time will heal some of those wounds. I think he did too much for this franchise for all of that to be ruined for these past couple months. But it is really sad, because this kind of stuff is going to impact his legacy
Mhm.
long term. And I love him. I'm a
Especially if he
huge
can't go anywhere. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a huge Jimmy fan. I'll be a Jimmy fan, but I definitely understand Heat fans that are just like done with him
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah, it's very, very disappointing that it got to this point because going into this, I was always of the impression, even if we can't trade him, maybe we can keep things civil to the offseason, just to maintain his ability to, be recognized as a Heat player that we've always loved, in the future towards the end of his career, or even just to open the capacity whenever he does transition into the part of his career where he's more of a, a veteran role player type guy. Um, that maybe he could come back to the Heat and, have effective minutes or something like that. That does not seem like it's possible right now. Anything is possible in the NBA. That's something that we learn every day, clearly. But it's very sad that it's gotten to this point where him being on the team is just a non-starter. And
Yeah,
it may just be the reality we're faced with.
yeah.
Um,
If
but
if
we'll
we're
see.
right and it is the Warriors and Andrew Wiggins comes here, I think they'll let him wear 22, and
Hmm.
I think that tells you everything you need to know about where this relationship is at now.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's our official prediction. Warriors slash maybe Mavericks, depending on what happens. But yeah, guys, it feels kind of crazy. 4 days away from the trade deadline. 3 days probably when you listen to this. So we'll be right there with you, living and dying with every notification from Shams, and we'll be excited to talk about it whenever it happens. Hopefully, assuming it happens, it'll be a very depressing show if it's February 7th and there was no deal. But yeah, so we'll close out the show today with talking with some on court, actual X's and O's kind of things, how guys have been playing. We've had some fun games since the last one. So we had a double overtime win against Orlando. That game was pivotal to Tyler making the All-Star game, because that was the last day the coaches could vote. And I think he had like 30 points and 12 assists, and a double overtime
Hmm.
win also put us to the 6th seed, which is where the Heat stand right now on February 2nd. That also helped because that put them over Atlanta and Detroit, which he ended up beating out Trae Young. Lost to Cleveland, got decimated. Not surprising. Cleveland's incredible. I don't think the Heat even played that poorly. Cleveland's just a really good team. And then an exciting win last night over San Antonio that ended with a huge Bam game, punctuated by a Bam buzzer beater that had me destroying my vocal cords in my living room. So that was a ton of fun to see Bam step up in that way. No Wembanyama. You can say like, oh, I'm not saying it's like a landmark win, but it's good to get a win. It was a fun game, even if it wasn't against the best competition. So, Lino, is there anything from these three games that's really stood out to you as a trend over all three, or just a specific performance in one of them?
I think Bam's play is maybe the highlight here. Tyler was very, very consistent through at least two of the games. Had a tough game against San Antonio, but really liked what he was able to, do in lieu of not being able to score. And I really like that the rest of the team picked up the offensive load from there, especially Bam. He's looking a lot more decisive, comfortable, and in the flow of the offense lately, while still, maintaining that defensive intensity. His minutes have been so impactful for these two wins against Orlando and against San Antonio. And it's just been really special to see, because we all know, anybody who's being realistic knows that Bam is this type of player and can be this type of player. And it's always been a matter of how consistently is he going to be this two-way all NBA type guy. Like, it's just a matter of time to me, and I think that time may be approaching. So excited to see him figuring it out. Hopefully he can maintain that. I love that his mid-range shot is going in, but also his threes over these past three games, very, very special spot shooting, catch and shoot threes from the corner, really expands the offense in a way that we really hoped for. And maybe it took until February for him to figure it out. But if he's got that figured out, that's going to be really key for us moving forward. And I think the only other thought I had was that Cleveland game. I was very interested to see how Bam and Ware were going to do against the Twin Towers there in Cleveland. But it reminds me of the quote that a Chrysler 500 looks like a Rolls Royce until a Rolls Royce pulls up. And Cleveland is definitely the Rolls Royce of running two bigs with two all-star guards. And so, yeah, we got a up close look at how that plays out. But at the same time, we got a good look at how it works. And so, I don't get to watch a lot of Cleveland basketball throughout the season, but it was very interesting to just see how just incredible that team is. Like, they're the real deal in my eyes.
Yeah, Cleveland. That's another reason Terry excelling is important, because Cleveland is showing when you have two ball handlers that are off the dribble 3-point threats. That's so beneficial when you're playing with a big lineup. So, if Tyler and Terry could be our, watered down, not as good version of Garland and Mitchell, that would be super exciting. But yeah, Bam. I mean, three straight games over 20 points, looking very confident in his mid range shot, being the incredible defensive player we know him to be. There was one play I wanted to point out, because it's just a little thing, but to me, it was like, I was like shocked by how brilliant it was. So I'm going to try and describe this well, because it was a little minute thing, but it was in the San Antonio game. There's a loose ball, and I think it was like Jaime and Bassie, or they were a Spurs
Mm,
player and a Heat player, both going towards the loose ball. Bam was on that side of the court, and Bam takes a step towards the ball to try and also pursue the loose ball. Recognizes the Spurs player was gonna get it, stops his pursuit of the ball. The Spurs player still doesn't have the ball yet. Pre-rotates to Devin Vassell, who is moving, getting ready to catch and shoot, because he sees his teammate's gonna get it, and Bam guards Vassell to stop him from getting a wide open three. To me, that was like, he, like, defensively, hustle wise, Bam is like the best. No, I don't want to say ever, but like the best of the best. Like,
mhm,
he is in the top tier 99th percentile. He sees his teammate isn't going to get the loose ball and isn't like, ah, shucks. He's like, okay, he's not going to get it. I need to pre-rotate this offensive player, pick him up, contest the shot. Like, Bam is so special. It's so fun to see him also get to play this kind of off-ball rover role on defense
mhm,
when Ware's out there. Ware's play has been hit and miss. I mean, the minutes are still very good defensively, even though
mhm,
Ware isn't super strong defensively yet. He's still jumping, over pursuing blocks, things like that. But overall, I think you're really seeing it unlock Bam,
mhm.
and it. I mean, we know Bam's awesome. We knew it was, there was 5 years of Bam being awesome just because his shots weren't falling. We knew. that wouldn't last. And yeah, just a super encouraging performance over really the last 3 games from Bam. He's looked really strong in all of them, and
Yeah,
I expect that to continue.
and I think another thing I wanted to point out was another play that really highlights just his ability to take over offensively and defensively. There's like a jump ball that happens, not a jump ball, but a loose ball happens. He's just the master of making the right play in those moments, and he's just physically dominant over guys. One, against the Orlando game, he's got that opportunity to guard Paulo Banchero, who is having a rough time right now since he got back from injury, but is still, an incredible player, and holds him to like 4 points over the course of those overtimes, and just really takes over those two overtimes offensively and defensively. Like, he was a main, scorer for our team through those two overtimes. He seemed to be stronger, faster, more conditioned than anybody else on the court. And that was really cool to see. And then against San Antonio, he plays all 12 minutes in the third quarter, plays 8 minutes in the fourth quarter. He is making these really smart plays, but at the same time, just being physically dominant. I think Chris Bassey came up with a rebound that was going loose to the corner out of bounds. Bam just takes it from him. Like, he
Hmm.
just handles the
Hmm.
ball, just rips it from him, says, "That's actually mine now.
Yep.
I'm stronger than you, and I'm better than you. And I'm going to show you how." And so it's just been a really special few games from Bam, just from that kind of mental standpoint, as far as him dominating the floor. Not so much against Cleveland. Cleveland really made it tough for everybody, but they're just the superior team. But in the spaces where Bam can do so, it's been very great to just see him make
Yep.
those moments happen.
Yeah, he looks confident posting up. He looks confident getting to his mid range. He knows the shots he wants to take. And like you were saying, the three ball looks confident.
Hmm.
It's he's taking them from the corners, from the top of the key. Tyler made some great passes. Tyler's getting so much defensive attention. And, he tried to force a couple shots, but I think it was mostly when he thought he was being fouled and just didn't get the call. But overall, I think Tyler still finished with 8 assists. He was setting guys up, fouled out Steph Castle. So I thought it was very encouraging for Tyler to still have a positive impact, even when it was a rough game from him offensively. The other thing, going back to Bam, I thought was interesting was they started this game. And if I can remember, this is the first time Spo's tried this. They put Bam on Steph Castle. And I think the
Mm.
thought process wasn't Steph Castle is the most dangerous offensive player. It was, okay, we're putting Bam on this non shooter to see if he can muck up the rest of the offense. And I think that was effective. I mean, the defense was very strong this game, but it also was telling to me that down the stretch, Keldon Johnson had been the Spurs' best player. And Spo was like, okay, Bam, go get Keldon. Like,
Yeah.
I to me, that's what Bam, where he really excels, is like that Darrell Revis one on an island. Like, you're
Hmm.
not scoring,
Yeah.
guard your
You're done for the
guard.
night. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to have a good time over here. And Bam, like Spo mentioned this after the Orlando game, such a good screen navigator. He's
Hmm.
gigantic and he navigates screens like better than all of our guards do for
Yeah.
sure, except for Drew Smith, rest in peace. It's like he just gets around. Like they were trying to get him off Paolo, like Paolo's life depended on it, and they
It did
could
depend
not.
on it.
It was,
And he
and
could.
Tyler did a good job, holding enough space, showing hands, making Paolo take a second for Bam to recover. I thought Tyler had a really strong defensive game against Orlando,
Mhm.
recognizing Anthony Black isn't a huge threat right now and, clogging up different lanes Paolo might have been able to attack. But, overall, it's almost kind of flipped. Like prior to this stretch, it was like Bam was doing all the little things but couldn't really score, and Tyler was doing all the scoring. And now we've seen at least a slight transition to Tyler figuring out how to do little things to impact the game, and Bam stepping up scoring.
Yeah.
Also, another solid stretch from Nico.
Yeah, dude. He's been so solid. Like,
Yeah, this guy is good, y'all. This
yeah.
guy is like legitimately, he's 21 and he is a good rotation player right now.
Which is crazy because it's like Nico, before this iteration of the team, Nico was kind of the wild card. It was like, okay, we're gonna throw him in there. And to an extent, it's still like this. Like, we don't really know what we're about to get, but it will at least be interesting. Whereas as we try to, navigate this, what's destined to be a 500 season, he has been a very consistent through line as far as consistency of play and performance, at least over the past few months. And so that's been really cool. Before we get too far into Nico, though, I did want to say I've just really loved how Tyler and Bam specifically have come together to lead this team in the absence of Jimmy Butler. Like, post game, pre game interviews, the conversations we see them having with the team. They're already the leaders on this team, even when Jimmy was here, as far as engagement and getting guys going and really rooting for the guys. But the way they've been able to step up amidst, all this chaos and really root for each other and in turn root for their teammates, it's been really special. Just watching Bam talk about Tyler making the All-Star team and just talking about being so cognizant of the conversation around Tyler this whole time. He even made a note to, talk about how ridiculous it is that people talk about Tyler's wingspan. He's like, he's got to get over, comments about his wingspan. And so that love that I've seen between them two is really special. And, again, I've always been in the camp that I never really wanted to trade Tyler. I understand that wasn't always rational because there's definitely better players available for him. But this has made it all worth it. Just these two playing together with such great chemistry and really starting to match each other's performances where they've always kind of had off-kilter seasons where one is usually doing better than the other. So, yeah, that's just been really special.
It really has. Spo mentioned that in the post-game press conference of the Spurs game that every time out, it was Tyler and Bam in the huddle getting guys together because it was a tough game. The Spurs were making runs. Again, it's a team you feel like you should beat without Wembanyama. So when they come back, when they take the lead, there's extra pressure there. You feel like you're really losing it. And so to have leaders on your team to encourage the younger guys and encourage the role players is really important. Also want to give a shout out to Kevin Love. He's played 2 minutes total over these 3 games, but his energy on the bench is really important. I mean, you see all those guys are like, you see a Haywood Highsmith offensive rebound putback and the bench acts like Anthony Edwards just jumped over Wemby. Like it's they lose their mind. And I think that starts with Kevin, who is in Miami because he was upset with his role in Cleveland. He didn't like how little he was playing. And so to see him transition to more of this Udonis Haslem mentor, motivator kind of role is really cool to see. It just, yeah, I think this season has been tough, but it's definitely galvanized this group. And not even in a sense like they all hate Jimmy. They want to show Jimmy they're good. Just that there's a lot of outside noise. They have to hunker down and stay together. And they've really done that in an impressive way. So do you have any closing thoughts? Anybody we didn't get to? Anything with the upcoming games you wanted to hit on, or any other thoughts you want to get out there for the people?
No, I think I'm trying to think if there's anything. I want to say something about Haywood Highsmith, but I feel like I'm still trying to figure out what his niche is going to be on this team. I like him as a starter. I think he fits that role given the guys we have out there, but I don't know exactly what I need more from him. It was tough just watching the shots not fall. I think we got like 4 Haywood Highsmith open threes that just did not go in. But they were good looks, and so I can't be mad at him just for not making them. But that is going to be pivotal for us to finish the season above 500. It's going to be him making the most out of those moments, trying to make those shots, which, comes and goes sometimes. But getting
Yeah.
some more offensive consistency there would be key. But, I mean, I like him. The effort's there. The defense is
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah, I thought he had a good impact on Chris Paul. I mean, he made him work for a lot of stuff. But yeah, Haywood, I mean, I think he's at 40% from 3 on the season, but
Yeah.
they're all very wide open. They're all not usually in like pivotal moments. So yeah, down the stretch, and he was missing those. That was tough to see. And I won't lie, the thought did cross my mind like, man, that would look different if that were Andrew Wiggins. Like,
Yeah.
that would be kind of cool if that was Andrew Wiggins.
Kind of fire if it was Andrew Wiggins.
So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Heat fans, thanks for tuning in. Dallas fans, sorry for your loss. And the trade deadline's here. We'll see you guys next time. Probably some kind of impromptu episode about ideally a Jimmy Butler trade, but if not, recapping the trade deadline in its entirety. But as always, check us out. We actually got a couple YouTube comments. Definitely appreciate you guys for checking us out on there. Also, TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, pretty much everywhere you can find any kind of social media. We'll be there. And yeah, we'll see you guys for the trade deadline. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time.